Monica?
Am I the only one who cannot hear, or everyone else? Seems I can't hear anything.
I can't hear too.
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Monica, your mic is mute. If you can hear me, your mic is mute. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry, is that okay?
Yeah.
Now it's better, please.
Right.
Great. Good morning. I'm Monica Addison, and
Can you maximize your screen, please?
May I do what?
Maximize your screen.
Okay. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you very much. I'm Monica Addison, and I'm presenting this paper on my own behalf and on behalf of other two co-authors, Kwesi Ohine Yanchra, Goodius Majawamarahi. Yeah. And we are presenting a paper entitled Assessing the Impact of Selected Agricultural Innovations on Income Distribution in Ghana. That's Gender Matter. And this is the outline of our presentation. And by way of a brief introduction, actually this paper is part of a commission research that was completed in 2018. This is the fourth paper that has come out of that work, that project. And we all know that fair income distribution has always been the key objective of societies. Inequality has been identified by policymakers as a major issue limiting social and economic progress. Evidence suggests that in developing countries, technological changes can influence income distribution either positively or negatively. Growing inequality in Ghana has motivated government to invest in the promotion and dissemination of agricultural technologies to reduce rural income inequality. These agricultural technologies that has been promoted in Ghana include different methods of land preparation, fertilizer usage and methods of application, soil water management methods, the use of improved rice seed, among just to mention a few of them. But for this particular paper, we focused on the application of fertilizer and the use of improved seeds in rice cultivation because they have achieved national coverage in Ghana. Studies have made comparison between the impact of agricultural and non-agricultural activities on income distribution. But unfortunately, all these studies suggest that non-farm activities have greater equalizing effects than agricultural activities. Few studies, however, have examined the relationship between agricultural technology and income distribution. Specifically, Hijama and others in 2008 reported that the use of NERICA has a neutral effect on income distribution in Uganda, whereas Dane and others in 2011 observed that the use of NERICA has a positive effect on income inequality among Yunnan province farmers in China. Apart from the controversy surrounding the impact of use of agricultural technology on farmers' income distribution, little is known about the link between gender, agricultural technology, and inter-household income distribution. Now, the aim of the research the main aim of the research is to investigate the link between gender, agricultural technology, and intra-household income distribution. And these are our objectives: to assess the effect of gender on rice farmers' income, and also to evaluate the impact of gender on intra-household rice income distribution. Our sampling technique include, we use multi-stage sampling technique, specifically purposive sampling of 2 regions, 2 districts, and 26 communities based on certain criteria in terms of regions that are rice growing areas, regions, communities, and then they have also experienced extensive promotion of these technologies, and at least those communities that we selected should be on the program for not less than 10 years. So these are the criteria we use to select them. And then we also, because it's gender studies, we stratify them into male and female, as well as because we are also going to look at the impact. We also stratify based on the users and non-users of the technologies. And we also use the randomized function in Microsoft to give each respondent in their stratum equal chance of being selected. In all, a total of 917 respondents, representing 115 users and 516 users and 401 non-users were selected. This also represented 546 males and 371 females. Specifically, about 40% of the sample size represented women. And this is the study location. The northern part and southern part of Ghana, and the communities are clustered within the map. We specifically focused on quantitative survey, but in trying to find means of interpreting some of the results, we also try to gather qualitative survey data from through the study, reconnaissance visit interviews. The first time we went there, we interviewed them, informal discussions with the rice producers to probe in issues of concern and field observation. And some of the structured questionnaire also had some qualitative aspect of it. So we tried to use all these to help us to interpret the quantitative survey. Data analysis process, we all know that adoption is endogenous in terms of and for efficient and consistent estimation, we adopted or we used a model that was proposed by Ma and Abdullah 2015 to look at or to address the selection bias that may be likely to be found in the sample data. This is a two-stage model, but the first aspect gives an estimation of the factors that influence adoption. And that was not the focus of this paper, so we're not going to interpret that result here. And then the second stage of the model is used to try to address the selection bias in the sample by identifying which type of selection bias is in the sample. And based on the type of the selection bias, we either use endogenous situation regression model to estimate the average treatment effect, or PSM. And for this particular one, the selection bias was based on observable factors, and therefore we use PSM to predict the average treatment effects of the treated using radius matching method. And then we also use Gini coefficient to estimate the intragender income distribution, and percentage change calculator was used to estimate the change in the Gini coefficient. Results and discussion. These are the variables that we use for the model. As we can see, they are all highly significant. But in the model results, we focus only on the gender and gender-related variables because that is our area of interest. I mean, the variables of interest. So this is why those that we have highlighted on in the slide. For gender, we realize that those who used fertilizer, gender impacted negatively on those who used their net revenue. Those who use fertilizer and those who use the combination of fertilizer and improved seed, gender negatively impacted on their net revenue. And then the farm size positively impacted on net revenue of the rice producers. We also find out that we also interacted gender with infant, taking care of children at home. And as we can see, it's also taking care of children at home also impacted negatively on net revenue of the users of fertilizers only. And then also the location, we also interacted gender with location, and also it also was negative, impacted negatively on the users of improved rice variety only net income, as well as the combination of those who used both improved seed and fertilizer. It also affected their net revenue negatively. And this is the results of the average treatment effect on the treated using the PSM. As we can see, for those who used the combination of the two had the highest income as compared to the fertilizer users only. That was the next highest income, and then the least among them was those who used only the improved seed. But in all, we realized that on the average, the male rice farmers registered 20.49% higher net returns than their female counterparts. And this was attributed to the key lack of the gender gap. By way, let me try and explain a little. We saw that childcare was impacted negatively on the net revenue. And in Ghana and in Africa, for that matter, childcare is a sole responsibility of a woman in the household. So we realized that those women who were having children and taking care of young children, especially infants, it really affected their net revenue simply because they were constrained with time to devote enough time to their rice production activities. And also land in Ghana, apart from the technologies that we have promoted, farmers expand or increase their production through not only through intensification, but also area expansion. So if a person has a large farm size, then it becomes advantageous to the farmer. But in our study area, due to cultural practices, some especially in the northern part of Ghana, women are constrained with time, with land. They don't have access to land. And even where they have access to land, the quality of the land is always, the men usually pick the best part of the land and then leave the rest for the women to use. And therefore, these two key issues, that is labor and farm size, appear to be the limiting factor for the women in terms of their yield and their net income. This is also the results of the Gini coefficient. As we can see, the left side is before the use of the technologies, and the right side is after the use of the technology. And it appears that in all cases, the Gini coefficient dropped, meaning that the use of the technology had equalizing effect on their income. But if you do further analysis, you realize that the adoption of the use of the technologies had a greater equalizing effect on the male users' income than that of the female users or the women users. And also, we did further analysis to find out the situation in terms of the change of the impact of the gender on the before the adoption and then after the adoption or the use of the technology. And as we can see, in both cases, there was a dip or a decrease in the Gini coefficient, but if you look at the change in Gini coefficient before the adoption, that was 0.063, and after that post-adoption, it increased, it rose to 0.16, indicating that the adoption actually widened the intragender income distribution in the farm households. So this is our conclusion. Childcare decreased women involvement in rice production. and impacted negatively on rice net income per acre, while land size, which was one of the mechanisms rice farmers employed to increase production and income, was skewed in favor of men and impacted negatively on rice net income per acre. On the average, as I've already said, the male rice farmers registered 20.49% higher net returns than their female counterparts. This has been attributed to gender gap in the key agricultural, such as land and labor in farm households. And the use of agricultural technology has equalizing effect, but it has greater equalizing effect, which is about 43.2% decrease on men rice farmers' income than their women counterpart, which was 38% decrease, percentage change. The use of agricultural technology further widened from what we saw. It further widened the intragender income distribution by 9.7% change. The study recommends that government should not only use agricultural technologies as a mechanism for redistribution of wealth in rural Ghana, but also ensure improvement in access to key productive resources, especially to women, to ensure equity at farm households. And this is the references, and this ends our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Now we go to the second paper, which is by Purity Chebet Diego. Purity, you have the floor.
Hello, Purity. Can you please unmute yourself and start again? We cannot hear you.
Okay. Can I start? Hello?
Yes, it's fine. Now we can hear.
Okay, I'm Purity Diego from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology in Kenya. And I'm going to present a study on forest extraction decisions and their determinants in Western Kenya. So a growing body of research has shown the importance of forest resources to the livelihoods of rural households. And according to FAO 2016, it is estimated that about 1 billion people get a significant share of their incomes from forest resources. So the recognition that rural households in developing countries diversify their livelihood sources into forest extraction has attracted a widespread attention from scholars and researchers. So according to the research that has been done, forest resources offer a broad range of goods and services, and the literature identifies two broad motivations for households diversification. So these motivations can be categorized into two: the push factors, which are the need for survival or necessity, or the pull factors, which is diversification by choice or for accumulation purpose. And studies show that poorer households engage for survival, while wealthier households engage in forest extraction for wealth accumulation. However, the recent evidence from research has shown that poorer households can also engage into forest extraction for the purpose of accumulating their wealth, whereas the wealthier households can also engage into extraction for the purpose of coping with shocks. So the empirical evidence on this factor, on these motivations of forest extraction, remains diverse and inconclusive. And despite the understanding, previous studies have considered forest extraction motives that is the push or pull factors in isolation of each other. And most studies do not take into account the heterogeneities in rural household contexts based in gender, income, and wealth categories. So this paper aimed at analyzing the nature, extent, and the factors influencing forest extraction decisions in Kenya. So exploring the determinants of livelihood diversification is important to inform the future conservation and livelihood improvement strategies. When it comes to the design and methods, the study was undertaken in Mount Elgon, which is located in the western parts of Kenya in Africa. So the area is characterized by a high level of forest dependence, a history of communal forestry, and high biodiversity. Mount Elgon is also one of the major water towers in Kenya, with the others being Mount Kenya, Cherangani Hills, Aberdare Range, and Mau Complex. Then we have the map of the study area, that is the map of Mount Elgon, which borders two countries in Africa, Uganda and Kenya. So the study adopted the use of the Sustainable Livelihood Framework to explain the linkage between the household assets and the livelihood strategies. So households diversify into various livelihood strategies depending on the kind of assets that they possess. In this case, in economics, they are called capital. So households use various capitals to engage into different livelihood strategies, for example, forest extraction, and they will always extract either for survival or wealth accumulation purpose. So and then we go to data and sampling. So the study chose 3 forest stations to represent the different administrative areas across Mount Elgon catchment. Then the study purposely sampled 30 villages within 5 kilometers of the forest boundary. The study also selected 924 forest-dependent households proportionate to the village population. Then this study was undertaken between the period of November 2018 and January 2019. When it comes to the estimation strategy, the study employed descriptive statistics to summarize the nature and type of forest extraction, and the value of forest products extracted were disaggregated by wealth categories using the principal component analysis. Then to determine the factors influencing forest extraction, we utilized the Crack's double model in order to understand the factors influencing forest extraction, and the mathematical formulation as shown. Then we go to the next slide. So this slide shows the description of household profile, that is the characteristics of the respondents, and they were categorized into, they are differentiated into participants and non-participants of forest extraction. So we have the various characteristics and how they vary depending on the participants and non-participants. This slide shows this slide shows the discussion of the table that I've just shown above, showing how the participants vary with the non-participants. For example, the participants in forest extraction were more likely to be of younger age. They had low levels of education. They were highly involved in farming as their main occupation, and they had low asset value and low incomes as compared to the non-participants. Additionally, they also faced more shocks. Yeah. And then we go to, now this table tries to compare the level of extraction in terms of wealth categories and also in terms of gender. For example, we have 3 categories of wealth groups, that is the wealthiest, middle wealthy, and poorest. So in terms of the overall value, that is the overall value of forest products, the the middle income households extracted at a higher rate as compared to the wealthy and the poorest households. Well, in terms of gender, the male households extracted at a higher rate as compared to the female households. This can be explained by the fact that the male households would be having more time to engage into forest extraction as compared to the female households. But when it comes to product category, the male households extracted firewood at a higher rate as compared to the female households. And this can be explained by the fact that in the study area, male households were more likely to access tools and implements that were required in the extraction of firewood, while when it comes to extraction of vegetables, the female households extracted at a higher rate as compared to the male households, and this can be explained by the fact that female households engage into extraction of forest products that are used for subsistence use as compared to the male households who extract the forest products for the purpose of commercial use. Yeah, so this slide just explains what I've shown in the table above, how the extent of forest extraction, that is the level of extraction, vary according to the wealth categories and in terms of gender. Now this slide shows the results from the Crux double model, which was aimed to analyze the determinants of forest extraction. So, according to the Crux double model, we have two steps. The first step shows the decision to engage into forest extraction, while the second step shows the level of extraction. Households first decide on whether they will engage in forest extraction. Then the next thing is that they will decide the level of extraction to engage in. So we can see that some of the variables were significant while others were not significant. And when I just select a sample of them, for example, education level, the secondary level of education had a negative influence to the level of extraction. That's the second step. And this can be explained by the fact that the households who are more educated were less likely to engage into forest extraction because they are able to engage into alternative livelihood sources, maybe wage employment or businesses. Now, when it comes to the fiscal capital, which represents access to infrastructure, distance to markets, and distance to roads, so all of them had a negative influence to the level of extraction. And this can be explained by the fact that access to infrastructure enables households to access other alternative livelihood sources, and they are able to exploit other opportunities, for example, business opportunities, hence they are less likely to engage into forest extraction. This slide just explains what I've shown in the previous table, that's the results here. Now, when you go to conclusions and policy implications, so participation in forest extraction was generally higher for households with low asset value, with membership in forest use associations, and for households headed by males. So institutional aspects such as access to agricultural markets, credit access, extension services, and membership in forest user groups increase the likelihood of extracting forest products at a higher value. Now, the middle income households extracted at a higher rate as compared to the low income group. The middle income households extracted at a higher rate because of their ability to access assets which are required in extraction of forest products, whereas the low income groups might not be able to access those assets, and hence engage at a lower rate. When it comes to the wealthier households, despite of them being able to access the assets and resources required for extraction, they might be as well, due to opportunity costs, they might not extract forest resources because of their ability to engage other alternative livelihood sources that have higher returns as compared to forest extraction. Now, the negative influence of age on forest extraction decisions implies that the young household heads could play an important role in forest conservation. Now, the younger households were less likely to extract forest resources, meaning that they could play an important role in forest conservation. Now, alternatively, households with higher levels of education depended on forest resources at a lower rate, meaning that promoting education in a study area could enable households to engage into other alternative livelihood sources, hence reducing the rate of forest extraction. Then we can see that low transaction costs motivated the poorer households to engage into alternative livelihood sources. This means that by improving infrastructure in the area, it could help poorer households to access markets and other opportunities, hence engaging into other livelihood sources and thereafter conserving the forest resources. That's the end of the presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Purity. Now, next paper is Aimable Sabimana from Rwanda University. Aimable, you have the floor.
Hello.
Yes.
I think Purity should first stop share screening before I can share my screen.
Yep.
She has to stop first.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yep. Yeah, we can see them.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming to this presentation. I'm going to present you a kind of descriptive paper where we are looking on the land policy and food market prices in Rwanda. And this is part of the wider project where the University of Rwanda and Michigan State University and Rutgers University are working. We are just looking at the impact of food, agriculture, and nutritional policies in Rwanda. And before we go into other empirical studies, we started with what is there. We look at the descriptive work, kind of the prices major crops in the country, the availability of major food crops in the country. Myself, I'm Aimable, and my other co-authors are Nate and Fidel, Dave, and Anwar. Briefly, I'm going to share with you 3 key points. I'm going to describe the policy, which is called the Land Conservation Program in the country, locally known Crop Intensification Program, CIP. And also I'm going to describe the data we used and the methods and the preliminary results. So in 2007, the government of Rwanda introduced a land use policy, a locally known Crop Intensification Program. And the objective of this policy was, of course, to improve the agricultural productivity, ensure food security, but also the efficient use of land, because Rwanda is a small country and it has a higher population density, And in addition to that, the majority of the household depends on agriculture. More than 75% of the Rwandan household depends on the agriculture for their livelihood. So because of that, the country took the decision to introduce a new policy where the land has to be used effectively and also in a manner that will use all the lands, which is arable land. So in that policy, the government prioritized 6 key crops. This is the maize, wheat, rice, Irish potatoes, beans, and cassava. And the reason was these are the major crops where in different areas of the country, the consumption is high for these crops. So the other crops could be produced in non-monocropping way, where they can still use their traditional ways to do intercropping. But these ones, they were just prioritized in that policy. So this is one of the examples of land consolidation program where in that policy, the people, they put together all their lands and then they produce only one crop. And that's where government will come for intervention. Government will give 50% subsidies of the crops, seeds, and the fertilizer. That's what make it the more attractive. So by regions where the people are going to put together all their lands and they produce the same crop, the government are going to come and intervene, subsidize their inputs. Okay. Now, after this policy, there have been some studies which, of course, have shown that the program has increased the farm income, but also has increased the productivity. And of course, you can understand because now the people are putting together their lands and then they're producing just one crop. That's obvious to know that the production has gone up. But then the question was to know whether so far this policy has affected the food prices, because as you understand, this has of course changed the farmers' routine working environment where they have to produce only one crop, and by producing one crop, they are going to forgive the land for producing the alternative crops where they have to go to the market to buy those crops, basically, if they want to eat them, or to produce them at minimum level, probably at near to their houses, but in the other relatively large plots, they have to produce only one crop into land consolidation program. So in this study, we try to see the price differences between the higher intensive monocrop CIP and low intensive. By high intensive monocrop CIP, I mean the regions, mainly the districts where different crops have been prioritized. And lower intensive monocrop CIP, it's the regions, mainly the districts where those crops are not under priority, which means they can produce other crops for priority, or they can just continue to do the mixed crops, traditional mixed crops. So in this study, what we are doing, we try to look at the variability of prices on 2 crops, maize and beans. Of course, the choice was pure random, but in addition, also we think about what type of crops that the majority of Rwandans are consuming. By using the National Household Survey, we find that at least 95% of the Rwandans, they eat maize or beans. Probably not maize, pure maize, but they also consume the flour from maize. So we also take into this into account. So we also look at the price of complementary crops. If the maize prices and the beans prices have changed, or they prioritize maize and beans in particular region, what about the prices of other complementary crops? So here, basically, we distinguish the regions, the beans production regions. These are the districts. Rwanda has 30 districts. This area is where there is higher intensive production of beans, while here it's lower intensive production of beans, which means here they can just continue to produce beans traditionally, mixed crops, or they can just do it, but they don't have interventions of the subsidies. And here you find that also we show the district, the intensive district of maize. This is intensive areas again, and here is non-intensive areas. It does not mean that the farmers don't produce. They produce in small quantity, and you find that the government subsidies are not provided because they are not producing in the land consolidation program. So here, this study, we just only use the pure descriptive analysis, but also try to do a integration method to try to see whether the change in the prices in the non-intensive areas could be induced by the changes in the change of the prices in intensive areas. So we use 3 main data sources. We use the data monthly. These are the monthly food price data from 2005 to 2015. Part of the data were coming from the Ministry of Agriculture. It's called MINAGRI. This is an abbreviation. It means Ministry of Agriculture. And this monthly price data, it's not aggregated. It's at least disaggregated at local markets. So the Ministry of Agriculture collects data on a monthly basis across the country in each market. I would say that I can also mention that in Rwanda, so we have those local markets where they just come at least 2-3 times per week. And then those are the market prices the Ministry of Agriculture collected. Also, the World Food Program, of course, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, they collected the rest from 2008 to 2015. But also we used the National Household Survey. One of them was before the intervention, and the rest was after the intervention. Here it's the first descriptive statistics from the data from the Bureau of Statistics, where we collected the information in the first round, 2005-06, where we collected the information about the land size, about the cultivated area, about also the farm yield, average farm yield. You can see the farm yield, and also the real market prices. This is the kilograms, the Rwandan franc per kilograms. And yeah, this is the second round, third and fourth. But this is not the same household. This is the cross-sectional data. But the important information is that we can see that there is kind of price variation across. We also have we describe the different zones. So intensive zones, that's where there's intensive product, where they get the intervention, the subsidies, and non-subsidies zones when they are producing. This is about beans. We are looking at about the price of beans. You can see the price is a little bit different before, but also afterwards, the price drastically a little bit changing. You can see that they are a shift. Here we also show the production of beans and maize using 2 rounds, 2014 and 2017. You can see that the production of maize is around, that means around the annual production of, it's around 126 kg on average in Rwanda, while in 2017 was around 119 kg. And you can see we have higher variation, much as the median value is far from the mean value. This also indirectly could predict that we have higher variation in the production of the producers and their farm yield, right? So we expect to have people with extreme lower production and others with relatively higher produce. So what we have seen in this analysis, descriptive analysis, we have seen that although this program has successfully increased the maize and the farm beans in the country, but the program seems to contain crop market prices. And we have shown higher variation in those two price zones, right? Where we have the higher prices in less intensive, while we have relatively low prices in intensive zones. And of course, this would induce the debate how the people would make the balance for their food if some regions are specialized in a particular crop that they need to sell on the other side, and vice versa, which will also induce the problem of the food diet. As you can see here, after the intervention, you can see before the intervention, according to the data we have, before the intervention, the market prices was almost the same. But after the intervention on the beans, we find that there is a shift of the prices where the non-intensive CIP regions, the price has gone up. And the reason is that they are now producing those crops. They have to rely on the people who are producing in another region. Similarly, but which is not probably the case, for the maize, we have that the trend in maize production was not drastically showing the difference. Even before, the difference was still there, while even after you find that there is no clear difference. And the reason maize is that you find that in the majority of all the regions in the country, they produce maize. Although we know that there are some specific regions which of course are benefiting from the subsidies because they are doing land consolidation in terms of maize production. But also in general, you find that in the country, also the other people still producing the maize under mixed farming. So we find that we show that the CIP program has shown the price differences across the regions, and these price differences, although we only just use descriptive analysis, we just put the point on the table that this could have induced probably the consumption burden, where the consumers has to pay higher prices compared to what they should have probably paid in the case they don't have the CIP. Because under CIP, those regions have to produce a particular crop, and if you want to consume that crop and you are not producing that particular crop, you have to buy it. And by buying, you have to say what you have produced. In the case some of the produce are not well done, so then probably the price are going to affect the consumption level of the people. So we also found that the program, the CIP program, has induced the prices of the other complementary foods, because the farm size is now converted into prioritized crops, which means the production of other non-CIP crops are going to reduce, which is going to affect their prices. So in brief, you can see that the CIP has induced the price differences across those two regions. But so far, what we have provided is that although we can see that the program has increased the production, at the same time it has also created the price gap between different zones, and this price gap need to be scientifically and empirically analyzed so that people can know how much welfare people are benefiting from increasing higher productivity, but also at the same time, how much people are losing in terms of the welfare chain when they pay higher prices to buy the crop, the food from which they are not able to produce in their zones. So in this study, we can't really say that we are doing any empirical analysis or analyzing the causal effect, because we are just describing the scenario, and the projects are just starting. We just started with this discriminant study before we go on the track to see what's the empirical study we can call out to show the policymakers how much the program has contributed to the welfare or has resulted into negative welfare of the people. Okay, I think without taking much time, this is what I wanted to share, and we thank you very much, and we look forward for your comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Next paper is Michael James Casozzi. Michael, you have the floor. You have to unmute your microphone and go to full screen. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. But can you go on a presentation so we can see the full screen?
Okay. We are together.
Yeah.
Morning to all of you. I'm Pasquale Michael James from Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, making a presentation on growth performance evaluation of 4 wild strains and 1 current farmed strain of tilapia in Uganda. As an introduction, you can say that tilapia have become one of the most abundantly produced fish in aquaculture. They are produced in over 80 countries. Of the tilapias, Oreochromis niloticus is the most cultured species. Its native range in Uganda includes Lakes Albert, Edward, and George, and the Albert Nile River. Its introduced range include Lake Victoria region waters, that is Lakes Choga and Victoria, and some of their associated satellite lakes, and the Victoria Nile River. The problem statement, there have been persistent complaints about the poor economic returns from tilapia culture in Uganda. This is suspected to be mainly caused by poor seed quality, poor broodstock management, and bad farming practices. The current seed is thought to be founded on a small population base that has been in place for a long time and has been inbred over and over for many generations. The practice is that small hatchery operators get their broodstock from other farmers, leading to inbreeding depression. This has greatly lowered the genetic integrity of the fish, leading to poorly performing farmed strains and consequently poor economic returns from the cultured tilapia. The main objective of this study was to develop a fast-growing strain of tilapia to be distributed to hatchery operators for mass production. Methodology. This study was conducted at the Aquaculture Research and Development Center, Kajansi, in Uganda. Now, tilapia parent stock were collected from the 4 major lakes in Uganda, that is Lake Albert, Edward, Kyoga, and Victoria. The stock was acclimatized on station for 3 months before breeding. After acclimatization, the 4 strains were bred to produce 4 pure lines of the respective strains. The different strains were then subjected to growth performance evaluation experiments, and the experiment took 132 days. The research design, the 4 strains of Nile tilapia from Lakes Albert, Edward, George, Kyoga, and Victoria, and 1 parent farm strain were evaluated to determine their culture characteristics for use in the species mass selective breeding. The evaluation consisted of 2 phases, namely, phase 1, we had 100 fly, we selected 100 fly that were between 0.5 to 3 grams of each strain. We are stocked in 1 by 1 meter happers and nursed to greater to 5 grams and above for a period of 42 days. The ponds were fertilized with biweekly applications of chicken manure. The fry were also given supplementary feeds at the rate of 15% of the body weight. Growth and survival were determined at the end of the period. Phase 2, the small fingerlings that were greater than 5 grams were then transferred and stocked in 2 by 2 by 1 meter happers and reared for 90 days. The ponds were fertilized with biweekly applications of chicken manure. The fry were also given supplementary feeds at a rate of 10, 8, and 3% for months 1, 2, and 3 respectively of the body weight. The experiments were managed as per the protocol similar to that used for the gift tilapia program of the World Fish. All happers were sampled every 2 weeks to determine average weight and average length of each strain. At the end of this phase, all happers were harvested and growth and survival determined. In both phases, water temperature, dissolved oxygen, and pH were recorded weekly in the morning and afternoon at 5, 25, 50, and 75 centimeter depth. Chlorophyll A and total ammonia nitrogen were measured every 2 weeks. Data analysis. Our null hypothesis was there are no differences in the strains as regards to growth, performance, feeds utilization, and survival during blowout production. Statistical data was analyzed using a t-test and ANOVA to determine if there were differences among the strains in the above characteristics. The coefficient of variation was calculated as the ratio of the standard deviation to mean to give the measure of dispersion. Now, these are our results. Where there is the parameters that we wanted were average initial weight, average final weight, weight gain, number of days, and then growth rate. Where there is ABT, that's Albert, Lake Albert strain, ED, that's the Edward strain, KY is the Kyoga strain, this is the Lake Victoria strain, STK is the currently farmed strain, or the currently farmed strain. And when you see on the parameter of average initial weight, Lake Albert strain was 2.86, Edward strain was 2.63, Kyoga strain was 1.2 grams, Victoria strain was 2.98, and then the farmed strain was 1.21. The average final weight for the Albert strain was 150.65, Edward strain was 187.26, Kyoga strain was 110.55, Victoria strain was 306.08, and the farm strain was 70.38. And the weight gain for the Albert strain, we had 147.79, Edward strain was 184.63, Kyoga strain was 109.35, Victoria strain was 303.1, and then the farm strain was 69.17. The number of days the experiment took, it was 132 days. So the growth rate per day for the Albert strain was 1.12. Edward strain was 1.4 grams. The Choga strain was 0.828 grams. The Victoria strain was 2.3 grams. And the farmed strain was 0.52. When you are seeing the expected well-managed growth rate has to be 1.5 to 2 grams. So for all fish farmers, once you are there and to see that you are performing well, the expected growth rate has to be 1.5 to 2 grams. Now, for all the technical indicators of the growth performance of the Nile tilapia strains at the end of the study, we found that the initial numbers for the old strains, they were 100. The final numbers were Albert, it was 100, Edward 97, Choga 100, Victoria 98. The current farm strain was 89, and the survival in percentage, Albert it was 100%, Edward 97%, Choga 100%, Victoria 100%, and then the farm strain was 89%. The initial biomass was for Albert was 286, Edward was 263, Choga was 120, Victoria was 298, and then the farm strain was 121. The final biomass for Albert it was 14,779. Edward strain was 18,455.22. The Choga strain was 10,935. Victoria strain was 31,413.9, and the farm strain was 6,263. Biomass gain for Albert it was 14,493. Edward was 18,192.22. Choga strain was.
Can you don't need to read all the figures, so we can see them. Just if you try to comment them, or otherwise we can just look at.
Okay. So as a conclusion, we found that the Victoria strain performed well as compared to the other strain and was recommended to be supplied to hatchery operators for mass production. Acknowledgements. This work was part of the bigger project of the genetic improvement of farmed Nile tilapia and African catfish. I am grateful to the World Bank and the government of Uganda under the Agricultural Technology and Agribusiness Advisory Services through the National Agricultural Research Organization for having funded the project. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And now we have the last paper by Alira. Alira, you have the floor. Alira Wayori.
Wayori, yes.
Yes.
Pascal, Lucio, please can you end your presentation? Can you see and hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, but we cannot see your screen. So
yeah, we cannot see the screen. We have something right. Yeah, we
Hello?
can see it. Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Good morning to us all once again, and welcome to this morning's presentation. My presentation is titled "The Coping with Weather Shocks." So is it rural institutions or portfolio diversification that matters? And this study is a joint study between myself and Professor Libenim Sabinen of Saskatchewan University, and it was conducted in Togo, Sub-Saharan Africa. So Basically, what motivated this study is that it's been observed with a lot of studies that climate change and its associated shocks continue to be a challenge in the achievement of the global food security and then poverty reductions. So there are a lot of studies in this area, and that also show that this impact particularly is enormous for sub-Saharan Africa. The reason is that most of sub-Saharan Africa are dependent on rain-fed agriculture, and this are linked with their livelihoods, which are also interwoven in this agricultural production. Another key reason is the absence of credit, insurance, and other factor markets in rural sub-Saharan Africa. So households are virtually vulnerable to the shocks that emanate from climate change. So the idea is that in order for these households to be able to cope and mitigate the effects of these changes, there is need for them to diversify away from rain-fed agriculture, and also to strengthen some of their livelihood bases. Portfolio diversification has been shown to present one of the best mitigating and coping strategies against shocks in sub-Saharan Africa. So a study from FAO in Rwanda, Zimbabwe, and also one study from Ghana shows that people who diversify their income activities are always better off in mitigating these shocks. So it means that the potential for portfolio diversification on welfare context is quite context specific, because in some countries it is found that the effect is positive. In other studies, it shows that, well, there is no any significant impact of portfolio diversification on mitigating welfare losses. And also another issue, key issue with diversification is that the effect is always shaped by context. So depending on where the households are located, the effects can be positive or negative. Another thing that normally deals with diversification has to do with the reasons why people diversify. So are they diversifying because they have been pushed into diversification? That is by risk mitigating variables such as climate variability, health shocks, market failures, or institutional failures. Or they have been pulled into it because they have seen that diversifying into a key activity in that area is opportunity driven. So they will make extra income, or they will enhance off-farm employment opportunities. So the ways through which diversification could impact welfare comes in a number of ways. So diversification can provide safety nets, both for ex post and ex ante coping strategies in terms of shocks. And then it can also provide stabilizing income streams. So households that have additional one or two diversified portfolios, even if one is at a stress, the other is portfolios could provide additional income to stabilize income shocks. They could also increase returns to investment through the economy of scope. So there is an emerging strong literature which also provides the argument that rural institutions, example, agricultural services, and then providing credit to access, and then as well as markets for these rural households remains very strong and very important if you want to strengthen these vulnerable households, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where some of these markets are either missing or incomplete, or even if they are functioning, they still have a lot of lapses. So the research questions that this study sought to answer were to identify the factors that really drive diversification to in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in Togo. Specifically, we investigated the push and pull factors. Second, to identify the link between weather variability. So weather variability, in this case, we used rainfall variability as a proxy for weather variability. That is the link between the weather variability and portfolio diversification choice of our households. And then finally, to identify the role of portfolio diversification or rural institutions in mitigating weather variability impacts on welfare. So for time, I just moved to the data and key variables. So the diversification index in this study was measured using the Gini-Simpson index. Basically, this is a measure between 1 and 0. And the higher the number, the more diversified the household is, and then the less the reverse. So 3 diversification index were calculated, one for crop, the next one for livestock, and then for income. So crop diversification was defined as a number of different crop species that is planted on the farmland, as well as livestock, given as the different livestock species that are kept by the household aside cattle. So the reason why we did not use cattle was because cattle species in these households normally are a bit bulky, and given that majority of the households are poor, they may not have they may not be measured the same way if you use cattle to determine their livestock diversification index. And then the last one was income. So this is the general income that is the household is deriving from different sources of income generating activities in the year of the study. And then the climate data. So the climate data was downloaded data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Institute that ranged from 1985 to 2015. And then the weather variable is measured as the long-term rainfall variability coefficient from 1985 to 2015. And then a lagged seasonal variation for preceding years is also calculated and added. So the data is a two-wave data, which was collected in 2012 and 2016. So for a lagged rainfall variation for 2012, the year 2011 is used, and for 2016, the year 2015 is used. And so the data, as I already mentioned, is from 2 years, 2 waves, and then involves 443 households, which were randomly sampled from 20 villages in the northern sector of Togo, which the 2 regions of Togo, specifically Kara and Savans region. And then this was also used together with georeference village level data. So the georeference data was to allow for the linking of the rainfall data with the referenced villages to allow for netting out of the effect of the rainfall variability variable. So this is the study area, and like I already mentioned, it's coming from the northern part of Togo, 2 regions, Savans region and Kara, and we have 20 villages. These are randomly selected, actually. And straight to the empirical strategy. So to identify the drivers of diversification, seemingly unrelated regression was used. The reason is that these 3 diversification indexes that have been calculated, they are not independent. So it is assumed that households that decide to diversify in one diversification strategy is also linked to another diversification strategy. So in order to estimate this with taking into account the correlation of the error terms, we use the seemingly unrelated regression models. And the Mundlach correction term has been added to take care of the endogeneity issue, which is calculated by adding the average time varying explanatory variables on the right-hand side all together in each equation. So to the results of the determinants, first is that we find a bit of a mixed result, that the long-term rainfall variability shock actually reduces investment in livestock and then increases diversification in house cropping. But when we interact the policy variables, we still see the same effect. However, the insignificant effect of the long-term rainfall variability on crop actually decreases. So it means that when households have access to credit and they have access to agricultural offices like agricultural extension services, they are more likely to, they are less likely to diversify into crop, because they then get more information and they get access to market. They can invest in other off-farm activities and therefore not be willing to invest in more in crop production, which is much affected by weather shocks. So for this regression, all household demographic and socio-economic variables have been controlled for. Now, when it comes to the access to credit, directly looking at it, we see that when farmers have access to credit, they invest, like they increase their crop diversification, they diversify more into livestock. And then when they have access to agriculture in the presence of long-term rainfall shocks, they are also likely to invest into livestock as well, whilst they are less likely to invest in livestock when they have more access, access to improved markets. So to look at the impact of variability shocks on welfare outcomes, this is the equation that has been estimated. So for the purposes of time, I just skip that and then move directly to the results. And then we see that long-term variability shocks, which we proxy welfare as a consumption per capita of the household, it has a negative impact on consumption, whilst having a positive long-term effect on poverty. So these shocks on the long time reduces consumption, whilst they also increase the probability of households falling into poverty. For the mitigation effect of diversification on welfare, a two-stage least square estimation was used to correct for endogeneity bias of diversification variable because of reverse causality in this estimation. And the effect is that apart from crop diversification, which still has a negative impact on consumption, in the presence of weather shocks, livestock diversification is able to smoothen out consumption per capita and also reduce the likelihood of poverty, households falling into poverty. So it means that diversifying into livestock production is a surest way to help these households to cope with consumption shortfalls during weather shocks, as well as increase their coping strategies in a very unstable environment where they are likely to fall into poverty. So the conclusions are that generally diversification is very low in rural Togo, and drivers are largely portfolio specific. There is no one-way trend why farmers diversify, and weather or rainfall variability shocks significantly increases poverty and reduces consumption as well. And there is a positive correlation between diversification choices and welfare, especially for livestock production. And the effect for crop diversification, however, shows continuously a negative correlation with welfare effects. With this, I come to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have now about 10 minutes for discussion. Now we'll organize like this.